It's 12 o'clock. I want to call this meeting to order. Welcome everybody to Sabetha. We'll start with the introduction of commissioners and staff, starting on my left.
Lauren Coyle Sill Hutchinson.
Gerald Lauber, Topeka.
Warren Gefeller, Russell.
Delia Lister, Pittsburgh.
Emmerich Cross, Kansas City.
Sheila Camus, Commission Support.
Jason Dixon, Commissioners support.
Brad Lovelace, Secretary, Topeka.
Dan Riley, Chief Counsel.
Okay. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda items?
There is, Jake George will be presenting the commissioner permit update in the general discussion in place of Stewart. And also you have there was a few edits to 115-826, the non-resident waterfowl hunting. The handouts I gave you, they're there, and then there's copies on the table of the new one.
Okay, who's going to do the commissioner?
The Jake George.
Okay. Well, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Commissioner Gefeller, so moved.
Commissioner Lister, second.
It's been moved and seconded that the meeting minutes of November, I don't think it's November 30th, but
Yep, that was our last meeting.
was that the last meeting?
Mhm.
How did I think December? Okay. All those favors say aye.
Aye.
Okay, today we have no public hearing. So we're going to start with the general public comment on agenda items. Does anybody have anything they'd like to address the commission that's not on the agenda? And I think you have something. Please come up, state your name.
How are you all today?
Doing well.
My name is Dave Studebaker. I've been here many times talking about catfish regulations primarily. I run Catfish Chasers Tournament Series here in Kansas, the Midwest, biggest tournament series for probably any species in the Midwest. And I'm here to discuss the recent rises in special event permit fees, trying to get some justification, trying to figure out why. I got a handout I gave everybody. I'm not going to verbatim it, but it gives an idea of what I was going to address. I was unaware. Last year I got all my permits way in advance, and evidently the fees changed sometime late last year. I was unaware of that. So for 19 years, this being my 20th year running the series in the Midwest, I paid $11.50 to have a fishing event at a state park. This year, I've been led to believe, and I got a permit that says so, that we have increased that just beyond fathom. I don't understand, to the point that it's going to cost me $200 for every event I have in the state of Kansas. Because 1 to 10 boats is going to cost $25, according to the permit. 10 to 20 is $100. And anything over 25, or well, I didn't read that right, but anyway, I have more than 25 boats. I average 50 plus in every event I do. 30% of those people come from out of state, so they're purchasing out of state licenses. They use the cabins, they use the facilities, all of that stuff. So we generate money for the state of Kansas. I'm a legitimate business, and I say that not jab anybody, but I mean, I'm an LLC. I send 1099s to everybody that wins money. I pay taxes on what little funds I might profit through the year, generating more tax dollars for the state, which is, I am a fellow state worker, so I kind of understand how this tax system benefits us. This equates to 1,739% increase for me to have an event that usually is very non-invasive to a public access ramp. there's no power available, there's no running water, lighting is suspect, you know, in a standpoint of having a big event, it's relatively minimal. It's what you gotta have for the ramp, that's it. There's no other services that are provided, and I'm curious how we justify a 1,700% increase if I don't get something else in return. Plus, my anglers all have to pay a $5 access fee to get in the park. So now you're making $250+ off that event anyway. I'm having a hard time justifying the results of, and I don't even know where it came from. I do believe they needed to raise. I'm not gonna argue that. $11 wasn't enough. The other question I have is, what difference does it make if there's one boat or 100 boats? A permit's a permit. I don't get it. I don't get sole use of the facility. I'm not locking the public out. I always set my stage, my weigh-in spot in a corner away, inconspicuous, so we're not affecting other public users of the ramp any more than we have to. Because I'm a business and because we're on the water, I have to provide insurance, not necessarily the state, but I feel I'm required to carry insurance. So I carry a $5 million liability policy. Those are added expenses to try to make this safe, make it legit, try to make it, you know, functional. Everything we do at the state park should generate money for the state park. It doesn't cost any. And if I look at the web page, and you got 2 attachments there, on the web page it says special events are negotiable based on event type, required service, and loss of revenue. Okay, that makes sense to me. If we're gonna cost you money, we should reimburse some of it. But then I go to the permit, which I got, the permit form, and it specifically says right on the top, and it seems like this is only targeting fishing events, because it specifically says boats. 1 to 10 boats, 25, 11 to 25, 100, which that math doesn't make sense to me. Over 25 is 200. There's no negotiation on the form whatsoever. So we can't put on there that it's negotiable based on what we're going to do and then say, nope, this is just cut and dry. This is what you're going to pay. So I'm just curious. I'd like possibly some justification, some reasoning for this increase. Why, what am I going to get for my $200? I guess is what I'm trying to get to. It's all about money. We all know that, but I have 6 events this year. It's going to cost me $1,200 out of my pocket to bring people to your state park, which is what we promote all the time, is bring people out. Let's utilize our state parks. I'm doing this. And I'm having to pay 1,700% more. I'm just curious.
What's your entry fees?
Mine are $500
It's $500 per boat.
per boat,
Okay.
What was it 19 years ago?
$100. We used to have 150 boat events when I was charging $200, which was 3 years ago. We had the biggest fishing events in the Midwest. Unfortunately, we all get older and I'm just not physically capable of managing all of that and make it professional. So we raised entry fee to lower boat numbers. And I felt having 100 boats on any body of water in Kansas, no matter how big we think lakes are, Milford say, that was always my biggest event was Milford. And we had 126 boats there once. The lake isn't big enough for that. I mean, we're just putting a lot of pressure on the resource where people are playing bumper boats. We got other public people out there that we're interfering with. So we decided to cut back on that. And unfortunately, my anglers have gotten used to a rather large dividend at the top end of that. So in order to do that, I raise the entry fee to circumvent not having as many participants. I do limit it to 50 boats now. 51 counting me because I wanted to fish.
Well, if you were at 50, if you get to 50 boats and it costs you $200, that's $4 a boat.
Correct.
And you're paying $11.50 an event. If you had 25 boats, that's 46 cents a boat.
Correct.
So, and you say that 46 cents is too little, but $4 is too high. So what do you think it should be?
I would be perfectly fine with a $50 permit fee. The problem is I'm this guy
So $50 for 25 boats would be $2 a boat.
plus $5 for every person that comes in the park. But nonetheless, and I do speak on I'm being somewhat selfish with my statements I've made, but I'm also looking out for, I've got several catfish, there's bass tournaments. They don't have this kind of turnout. I am, without bragging, I'm the tournament guy in Kansas. However, the smaller people aren't gonna be able to, 25 boat tournaments paying $200. And they got $100 entry fee. By the time they pay that fee, take it away from the fishermen, there's nothing left. There's no money left. So you're gonna lose participation. These events won't happen. And unfortunately, in the world today, $1,000 prize isn't all that much anymore with the way the world is today. I mean, $1,000, I mean, it sounds bad, but that's not the amount of money it was 20 years ago. So we have increased to get that, and I am in a position I can offset that. I'm not arguing, I'm arguing in a sense, but it's a big picture. There's a lot of events that go on throughout the season, bass, crappie, walleye, whatever. And what my biggest fear is, and this is a concern that I have, is that if the smaller tournament series or events can't justify the $200, they're going to start doing their weigh-ins at Dillon's and Topeka and not even tell you these events are going on, and they all turn to kill tournaments and we don't get our fish back. We are 100% catch and release. We promote that beyond any imagine you guys would have. And we want these fish to stay in the bodies of water, because that's why we come to Kansas. That's why these guys come from Oklahoma, Texas, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa. They come to my event because of Kansas fishing. If Kansas fishing is detriment by what we're doing, they're not going to come anymore. I mean, that's just plain and simple. They're going to start going to the southern US where they catch the same fish we have right here now. And they're going to spend all their money somewhere other than Kansas.
Connor, the Parks Division. Can
Okay,
I?
Mr.
Yeah.
Commissioner, we have Connor from the Parks Division online that.
Okay,
Hey,
Go ahead, Connor.
I was just going to make a mention about this. We had some pressure from our federal partners on people individuals and entities making revenue from these types of tournaments. So that's kind of the reason that increase took place. But we've heard a lot of feedback similar to yours. So we have rolled back to our original fees, and we're going to take a look on how we're going to structure those going forward. So those that paid those initial funds are getting refunded here in the coming weeks. So it's going back to the original fee that you were mentioning before, until we can look at and see more how we're going to do that in the future.
And something, I mean, if you guys were if it was gonna be a thing, and I have put this in there, I also think that you guys need to look at other forms of events. I mean, I don't want to be singled out, I guess, as an event promoter, but we have guides that guide from state parks. They make money off the state park property, as I do. It says 1 to 10 boats. That's one boat, and they are promoted. And just like any other event, they should have to pay every time they use your state park to make money. If I have to, they should. I mean, that's being a little condescending. We also have the party coves at every lake, and they jam up every boat ramp on a lot of lakes so they can go out and do whatever they do. And some of them are actually a hazard to the public because of choices they make while they're out there. They don't have to pay any additional fees. And they also have web pages promoting their party cove, Nudie Beach at Milford. There's several of these. They have actual. So where do you draw the line, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, I'll be sure to follow up with our team on this too and get these addressed. But just want to let you know that those, like I said, those fees increases aren't there anymore, just until we can figure out exactly how we want to move forward.
Okay, well, I'm going to say I'm happy, but there does need to be a structure, though. I mean, I do believe that they should increase with the times. I just don't know that big of an increase in a 3-month period is warranted, I guess, is what my argument would have been, so.
Well, maybe it was just too little too late.
Well, maybe.
46 cents a boat, was ridiculous. So maybe it is time to move up. If you didn't have the state park system in public lands, where would you?
I told her the Corps of Engineers ranch. There's some marinas, there's places to do it. We like to use the state park facilities. They're nice. They're clean. We like that, and a lot of them are the biggest areas that make it possible. And I don't want to not use a state park. I just don't. But when it comes down to And now if they did a charge per boat, if they figured out a structure for that, that's fine. That makes sense. But, you know, for somebody that is 100% payback on their tournaments and don't make any money, now they're taking it away from, they're either costing themselves money to have this event for people to participate, or they're taking it away from the participants. Either way, it costs somebody something. And I will say there are a lot of events out there that aren't LLCs. They don't, it's a handshake and some cash in an envelope. I understand that. We don't run that way. We are true blue. We do everything we're supposed to do. I paid out $139,000 in prize fund last year. And I sent out W-1099s for $130,000 for taxes to be paid back to the state.
Okay. All right. That sort of answers your question as
It
far
does.
as
I
in
mean,
the
that
media.
that was easier than I thought, but that wasn't a lot, but.
I'm gonna ask Cameron questions, but before you go, what's it cost with, Van that?
Nothing. Yeah, Kansas is the only state that we participate in that charges any event fee. But, you know, that's irrelevant. I'm not so worried about that. I don't believe that we should not let you guys know. Because then you get illicit stuff that shouldn't be going on. I think we should register with you guys and let you know that this event's going on. Gives you an opportunity, and I encourage, and they haven't done this for a long time. I truly encourage any biologist, any game work, come down, see what we do. Get some fish samples if that's what you want. We're giving them to you. They're right there in a bucket. They're easy to get. I think it would be very beneficial, but of course, we're always working on the weekend, and I know how the state is on overtime. So, you know, we just kind of, it is what it is. So we do provide that opportunity. I have nothing to hide. They can come, they can stand right next to me the whole time. Doesn't matter to me. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you guys and gals.
Is there any other public comment on non-agenda items? Yes, ma'am.
Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I did have the opportunity to speak with Lauren yesterday. My name is Trish Bryant. I am from Salina, Kansas. I am currently, my employment is, I work for a nonprofit called St. Francis. I'm the COO. I've worked there for over 40 years, helping children and families from the state of Kansas. So I frequently work with, you know, the child welfare, social services in Kansas. So I understand and I appreciate this opportunity to speak here. I'm really here on behalf of my family, especially my mother, who is 90 years old. We are family farmers from Barton County. And as you're well aware, in Barton County and Cheyenne Bottoms, there is a controversy going on right now about the solar panels that a lot of leases have made to the local landowners. So right now there's a pause on everything until it can all get sorted out. There has been some objections to doing the solar farms. It's my understanding that perhaps Dr. Witt came and talked with you all back last summer. That's my understanding. So I just wanted to come and present some family farm viewpoint of this. If you're on my family farm that was homesteaded, that we've been able to maintain over the years, we haven't lost it. It's taken a lot of work from many generations of family. We have the original document from President Garfield when we homesteaded it, and we still own the property. And luckily, my nephew has finally moved into the farm and is living there with his wife. They got married a summer ago, and we've had to rent it for the last 25 years since we moved my folks to town because they were older. My father has passed away, but my mother's still alive. And so in 2018, I happened to be home for the holidays, and the solar farm company came and visited with my mother and all of us siblings as we talked about it, because they knew that we would eventually inherit this property and that we wanted to sustain it in the family. And so we did sign a contract. Things were going along very well. The county commissioners, you know, are concerned, rightly so. There are zoning laws that the counties must participate in. We are conservationists as family members. I could go out in my family's yard, look north, and I can see the bottoms. I've seen it my entire life. I mean, it's beautiful. We have, our family has won conservation awards from the Farm Bureau. We respect Kansas Department of Wildlife. We admire what you do. We want to continue to be good stewards of the land. But as you all know, farming is a difficult job. We have lost and we have gained over the years. It has taken a lot. My dad always had 2 jobs because he could not sustain farming during his generation. But, you know, it goes up and down. There's great years and there's not so great years. So my ask today is if this would come before this commission in the future, if you would please notify us, because I would like to participate and represent my family and any other landowners that would let me, you know, participate and do that as well. Just because I've been involved with some political things in the past with my role at St. Francis, I know communicating is the best thing we can do. So I appreciate your time today, commissioners. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
All right,
Well, thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for Secretary. Because this, your issue is in our part of the country out there, it's a pretty big deal, and for Cheyenne Bottoms, it's a pretty big deal. So what is the status of, I know the county commissioner has to act at some point. Have they acted out there yet? I don't know.
Yeah, Brad Lovelace, Secretary. So I don't know the status today, but on the call, we have Jordan Hoffmeyer. Jordan, could you come on and answer Commissioner Gefeller's question about kind of the status as you understand it out there?
Yeah, sure. So can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as I know, I've not heard any updates regarding the county status. We had met initially one time with the solar company to discuss, you know, what our role as an agency is from a regulatory capacity, and you know, expressed, you know, what concerns we might have related to threatened endangered species, as is our regulatory duty. But we have not reviewed anything officially. We have no documentation to review from them at this point. So we're still waiting on actual layouts and plans from the solar company before we can actually conclude an official.
Is there a point where the feds get involved too? I mean, this is a migratory flyway that.
Yeah, so yeah, Jordan, why don't you answer that about T&E species and federal involvement, would you?
Oh, sorry, Jordan.
Apologize, I muted myself, so I wasn't giving the feedback. Yeah, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will have an opportunity to weigh in on it through multiple processes that the solar company is going to do.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
You know, I do know, I've been trying to do is just research myself, and we've not seen anything that we can see at this point, and I would love to hear what the research would say, because our goal, I mean, we want to conserve and we do not want to run the birds off. We've tried, I'll be honest, to get them not to eat our fall crops. In fact, we would put out cannons that were, you know, that would blow off, because if there was a drought and we had to plant a late fall crop, the birds would come in and pull out the wheat or the milo by the roots. And so we would lose that crop then. And so we put a cannon out there and blow off on a timer. They'd fly across the street to the other field. And as soon as he found out, he bought one, and they'd come back. And this was just the game of the birds flying back and forth. So, you know, I live in Salina. I see birds come over Salina, a city of 50,000 all the time. I just, you know, I don't want it to disrupt it, but I don't know if we know if it will. And so I hate to not give future generations, especially when I think about my children, my grandchildren, their children, my mother's relatives, you know, generations down the road. I would love for us to be able to keep this family farm from them. I think the likelihood of that happening, I think in 50 years, we probably won't own any more land. Would be my guess. And that's a shame, because both my mother and father's families settled in Barton County. They came over, They came in the 1860s. They were homesteaders, and by the grace of God, we've been able to hang on to it. So
Mr. Chair, if I could comment, well, we are glad to share information with you, everything we know. Of course, when Jordan and folks in ecological services get involved, it's based on the best science that we have, and we're very transparent about that. And so feel free to connect with Jordan, and we'll share that with you. And Jordan's point, if you didn't catch it, was we're reliant, we can't fix that developer to share with us the location of that solar array. And that's really what we need to do our work, to say, you know, if the proximity to the bottoms is an issue, or to any other features. So we're still waiting on that and haven't been able to get that yet.
I can share with you myself where our property is located. We're approximately 6 miles straight north of the bottoms. One of our pieces, and the other one's about 3 miles. And it is between the bottoms and where Barton County Community College is located. So that would give you a good indication of where we're at with our family farm, if that would help you. And Jordan, I think maybe you called me this morning because Commissioner Lauren, I will return the call. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment on non-agenda items?
Mr. Chairman, we do have one online.
Okay,
Jackie, I'm gonna mute you now.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity to join you virtually. I'm Jackie Augustine. I'm from Topeka, Kansas, and I'm the Executive Director for Audubon of Kansas. I'm joining you today because I have 2 things that I'm concerned about and was hoping to get your take on it. So the first one is that we've heard of some examples this morning about how Kansas state lands are great for fishing and great for wildlife viewing at Cheyenne Bottoms. And I know that's what you aspire to do. But there are other state parks, and I'm calling out Cheney Reservoir State Wildlife Area that is overrun by Old World Bluestem. And so I just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of this and the department was aware of this. And we had some conversations with the parks, and they are looking at possibilities, but as you know, Old World Bluestem is an invasive species that chokes up, dozens and dozens of, if not 100 native plants. And so I would encourage that something be done. Right now, we've had communication with a neighbor at Cheney State Park who's trying to do a native plant nursery, and that livelihood is being threatened by the Old World Bluestem that's at that park. So that's our first concern I wanted to make sure the department was aware of. The second one is with prairie chickens. And I know that this year, in the past, the department has been doing aerial surveys every 3 years for greater prairie chickens. And I know lesser prairie chickens, they're moving to a 3-year schedule. And so I think this is the 3rd year. And so I was just hoping to get some feedback to see if those aerial surveys are going to be conducted this year. I know that I find them really valuable because they look at prairie chickens, both greater and lesser prairie chicken populations throughout the state, and really help us get a handle of where our populations are going and where we can put our efforts. And so those are my 2 comments. Thank you.
thank you. Any other public comment for non-agenda items? Kitty?
Kenny Graham, you guys all know me. Actually, after the last commission meeting, we got a lot of feedback. A lot of the guys can't come because of being in the middle of the week. They're working, making a living for their families besides what they do. Organizations, COLA, Kansas Outdoors Landowner Association. We currently are up to about 12.8 million acres that we're leasing and managing that are, our members are. That consists of 41 businesses. 41 businesses that are LLCs, LLPs that pay money in the state. Seem like we've kind of been overlooked, which we're not going to be overlooked anymore in the future, but we've been overlooked that we are businesses. And even per the governor in her state of the state, she referred to how important the wildlife business was, and it is a business. We appreciate everything Kansas Department of Wildlife does by far. When you look at 12.8 million acres, that varies from 12 acres to people owning 46 acres. Or 46,000 acres in the state. That is a heck of a lot. That gives you guys a lot of responsibility when you're setting rules and regs. And we appreciate it, what you're doing, trying to look out for things. But there was a comment in the last meeting that was done by Mr. Spore, Commissioner Spore, that was called out by a lot of our members. I mean, we were overwhelmed in emails. It was talking about fair chase and wanting to change rules and regulations due to fair chase. You know, I got a lot of bow hunters that say hunting with a gun isn't fair chase. We get a lot of guys that hunt with traditional guns, say putting a scope ain't fair chase. Fishermen that say using a life scope isn't fair chase. Fair chase is something that is set for the individual. Rules and regs are there to help us stay in line and protect our game as good as we can. And needless to say, 300,000 acres that you all manage compared to what we manage is a big difference. But if we manage it together, it's a lot better. And a big concern a lot of the guys had was this. At what point does an individual's opinion override a rule and a reg because he doesn't like using a crossbow versus I can tell you thousands of bow hunters that think crossbows are wrong, and I ain't here to get rid of crossbows. I think anything anybody does, and it's within the laws of that state, is well within boundaries of what they do. And the question I have, are you guys set there really to make, and I appreciate Commissioner Seal making the comment, get me out from behind this table and I'll have a conversation. You did, it's on there. I really appreciate that comment because she understood that being a commissioner behind that table is looking at rules and regs and working with the department is what it is. There was very few other words said at that meeting at all. And question I have, I would like to have answered. You guys are not set here to set personal opinions and personal agendas on fair chase. It's more for recommendations that come from the department, not ordering them to make recommendations. We're trying to get a real good understanding to help share with our representatives and state senators too. Thank you. I would like to have an answer to that, Darrell. We could.
Well, I don't know if I have an answer exactly what you're saying. I mean, our private opinions are not what we deal with, although it's hard to separate sometimes. And I just don't know if I have a good way to answer that will not spawn more questions. I don't know if Brad has anything he'd like to add.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Kenny. I guess what I would say on behalf of the department is it's certainly clear that fair chase is a fairly subjective topic, right? And so that subjectivity means that opinions will vary, as you pointed out. What we try to do is look at what is being done across the country and what's kind of generally accepted, you know, as reasonable standards. But it's a scale that keeps changing, right? A lot of us never envisioned that a lot of the technology that's available now would be available 20 years ago. And so keeping up with that is a challenge. But what we feel like the best way to address that subject of what are ethical means of taking, you know, wildlife are to consult with other folks around the country, have conversations here with the public amongst ourselves, and try to come up with a solution that makes sense for us here in Kansas. And so that would be the plan in the future. If we ever, I mean, recently we changed some regs around fishing rigs that could be used. And that was a long conversation we had, and I think it worked out pretty well. But any change we would make, Kenny, would go through that same process. A lot of give and take and a lot of conversation. And, you know, the meetings we've had with guys and outfitters over the last few years have been to have just those kind of conversations.
Okay, no, appreciate it, and I wasn't trying to point it out, but when those comments do come from behind the table, they draw a lot of attention real fast and stuff. And I know it's hard to separate your personal feelings from business, believe me. I spent 41 years in the pipeline besides being an outfitter. And I'm gonna say this again, an outfitter is a business. We have 41 companies, and there's a lot more than that that are businesses, bring a lot of money in the state. And I know they're gone, but the gentleman that runs the fishing tournaments, the amount of money that they bring into this state is pretty incredible. If you think about it, because even the department gets a percentage of buying anything, fishing poles, boats, anything, that goes to a percentage to our department. You guys are advisory. These are the guys that are sitting back here to do the work, and we appreciate the work they do. I'm just a guy trying to do a business, represent a lot of people want to do business. And when comments come from there, I just want to kind of help make aware. I've said it before, don't want to fight. I want to work. And Brad was good enough, and commission and your employees were good enough to have a good meeting we have with Kansas Outfitters. And we plan on having a lot more of those in the future. But thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to take the opportunity to mention again, the concept of fair chase, I think, is a very important concept to consider every time we think about something, but it is subjective. And unfortunately, when things get to us, they've advanced to the point where we're considering regulation, and the conversation is totally different when we're considering something that might affect your business. If there is a forum or a way without jeopardizing the public meeting law, to have that conversation before we're even talking about it in the context of a regulation, that would be so much better for us all to get on the same page. You know, we all want the same thing. Your business depends on high quality game, good numbers, healthy deer, big deer. That's what we want. So as we consider things, though, I mean, you know, as technology comes along that gives advantage to the hunter, does that hurt or help our goal of having, you know, good numbers of high quality game? So I just like to figure out a way to have to get all the constituencies in a room without thinking about the specific regulation, and just have the conversation about how do we benefit game in Kansas. So,
I think a primer that would go along with that, Warren, and I appreciate your comments, is also just a review of what it means for our natural resources to be held in public trust for the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries are all the citizens of Kansas, not just hunters, not just people who want to make a business. And so there is a balance I just think that needs to be part of the conversation, is what it means for our wildlife to be held in public trust and for private entities to be profiting from that, and how we balance that. All I'm saying is that needs to be a part of the conversation. And I agree with Warren that would best happen when both sides are willing to listen to one another. But there is That's a significant part of it and it relates to that. That's all I want to say.
Okay,
This actually goes deeper than the state of Kansas. This goes deeper than businesses. Over half of the land that is managed by the department is core ground. That's federal ground. That's land that is controlled, owned, and bought by the people of the United States. This was something was brought up to me. We can't bring ourselves to be selfish enough anymore today, unlike it was. I started 31 years ago doing this. I've hunted for 57 years of my 64 years. We can't be selfish enough like that to say, man, we're right here. This is our place. This is all it is. Because what makes those departments better, lets the parks grow, lets everything grow. Let's get down to the fact, it's money. Money coming into the state helps buy the, I know Lehigh Quarry was donated, but there is an incredible amount of money is being asked to build it back up from where it originally was. That money comes in not just from the people of Kansas, but people who visit here. And if you go to the Department of Economic Development and you talk to them, they'll tell you from September until the end of December is one of the highest tourism times in the state of Kansas for bringing revenue in here. Go visit with them and see, have her show you the chart on that. It is really high what comes in here during hunting season, and that's people coming from out of state. They pay more for licenses, tags, motels, hotels, leases, everything they do. And it is my business. It's hotel businesses, it's restaurant businesses, Casey's, the places that they buy items from. It's much more than just our business and what I'm concerned about. It's a lot of businesses. I'll admit it, money coming in from out of state is what helps drive me, but I also have 14 hunters for in state. They are, so, well, thank you. I just, that had to come out.
Go ahead. And Mr. Chair, while he's walking up, if it's all right, I might just make the comment so we're all realistic. One of our challenges to have informal conversations with these officials is anytime we get them together, we can't talk about agency business and still meet the requirements for Open Meetings Act. And so it gets to be a little bit of a challenge, but we'll do our best to work with our legal counsel and figure out if there's a way we can have early conversations about these topics. Thanks.
okay, yes.
Thank you all for being here and listening to our issues. My name is Tony Mann. I'm representing Kansas Hunting Adventures, which is a small business of mine. And I'll apologize ahead of time. I'm not a public speaker. So, but before I have final issues with my business, I'd at least like to ask some questions and see if you couldn't answer them. And some of them, I'm sure you've been asked several times. I don't follow your commission meetings, probably like I should, but at least if you would hear me out. Deer hunting is a large part, the biggest part of my operation. I have 15 hunters, deer hunters, 4 muzzleloader, 5 rifle, and 6 bow hunters. So over about 2,500 acres. That's my total amount of hunters that I have. I've been in business for about 20 years, so I kind of know how things work. My question is the tagging issue. I've talked to Mr. Lovelace a couple years ago about it, and I'm sure you've been asked several times about the same issue. But about 4 years ago, I had the problem of over half of my hunters not drawing a tag. And of course, as far as the business goes financially, that is a problem. So I wanted to bring that up. And in the past 4 or 5 years, I've had at least two or three tags a year not drawn, up to 5 or 6. And that 1 year, I had 8 out of my 15 that didn't draw, and it I went and read that year, hoping for better years to come. I read a little bit in your last week or last meeting. There was somebody brought up the issue of transferable tags. Years ago, when that was the main way of drawing a tag for a non-resident, it was a little challenging trying to get the right amount at the right time for the hunters you were getting. But then when you went to regular tags, the way we are now, it wasn't an issue until we run out of tags for some people. So anyway, the transferable tag would fix my issue at the drop of a hat. I don't know where you guys are at with any solutions to this. Do you, if you could answer, anybody have any ideas on a possible solution
Well,
to that?
previously in the area of transferable tags, the department has taken a position against those.
Mhm.
And it makes it really hard for deer management. We had that once before and it basically disappeared because of a perceived problem that developed with it. And so that's been our position previously.
Sure. And I understand that there would be an over influx of more hunters is what would happen overall. But for like my business, I have to lease the same amount of acres every year to provide for my plan. I can't afford to drop those acres. They're very good places to hunt, but if I don't pay them one year, somebody else is gonna get them. That's a guarantee. So that's, you know, as far as a business plan goes, I know what I'm paying out, but I have to have that influx of hunters or I fail. And it's getting to be serious. I've always done this as a part-time job. I had a full-time job working for our county. So money, I could afford a loss in one year, but you know, the next year you hope you make up for it. And it's just getting to be a bigger problem for me. So, you know, I have a financial payment that I have to make every year, but I'm not having my income that I need because of tags. And I'm sure I'm not the only guy in Kansas that's having this trouble. What are other outfitters doing? I'd rather not break the law. If
We'll talk real serious.
Okay.
Some things going on to people with the legislation.
Okay.
And
Well, but yeah, and I appreciate that. I will. But these guys are the ones that would have a legal solution to my problem. I'm not the only guy that's came up here and asked this, am I?
No,
I mean, I would surely think not. Unless they're doing something that I'm not. If you know what I mean.
no, I hear you.
So anyway, I didn't know if you were willing to work for a solution for this, or if it's just something that, you know, I'm at the verge of, you know, I'm at the age where it's getting to be work.
We
lifting my
issue,
stuff around.
we issue a certain amount of tags. And not having a decline of 8 out of 15 or 8 out of 14 is very unusual.
I was
But
told that.
we do have an increase in demand.
I know.
And you know, there's other states that have the same thing. We're not alone in not insuring the deer if you want to hunt. There's still a draw process.
Sure. I understand the challenge. I just, you know, one solution that I thought of, and I've been in contact with my representative, Lisa Mosier, if you're familiar with her, and Elaine Bowers, Senator, over the last couple of years. I know that it's a challenge for you guys. But if there was a way that, say, an outfitter like me that's been in business for over 20 years could prove to you that I've been here long enough and I'm not breaking the rules, I have a certain amount of land that I have to lease. If I could prove to you that I've been in business that long, can I get my 15 tags? You know,
Mr. Chair.
I don't know if that's a.
One thing, in our conversations with guides and outfitters, one of the things that's come up that made a lot of sense to me, and Kenny, you were there to hear this, was talk amongst themselves, right? Because you have the hunters that you're planning on getting the next year, they go through the process. Most of them draw, some of them don't. So you may be high or low for a given year. And so what I heard them talking about was conversing with each other and saying, hey, I've got too many for the land I've got. Do you have room for more, you know, on your land? And just that communication, just as businesses, I know you're in competition, but it sounded like there was quite a bit of talk to share to meet that demand and kind of match up a little bit is one thing I heard.
Okay, but you're saying if one group has more tags than they need?
No,
they
no.
can
Well, basically, you've got so many clients who are planning on coming to yours.
Right.
And if some didn't draw, now you've got openings, you could call a neighboring outfitter
I
and
see
say,
what
are
you're
you
saying.
long? You know, and of course, there's the demand, as Chairman Lauber mentioned, demand is going up. And so
Right.
the value of your land and the demand for that is going up. And so the other thing is we've talked about how we can connect hunters who drew but don't have a place to go, and you're part of the state. We're trying to figure out how to do that. And right now, as an agency, we don't have that kind of mechanism, but it sounds like working together with your other outfitters out there may be a good solution for you, because we've heard that working elsewhere.
Sure, and okay, that's something I hadn't really thought about. But I guess the challenge I have, I guess you'd call it a challenge, is I've had the same guys come hunt with me.
Right.
For the rifle group has been coming with me for over 20 years, my original clients. And I like to keep them guys. They're very good with what they do. They don't break the law. And I have had in my early years had some guys that were, you know, guys you didn't want. They're around. And I don't like that. So the guys I have now, I've had most all of them for at least 10 years, some for 20. I like to keep that same group of guys. And so anyway, that's part of my challenge there is, I guess, is keeping the same guys, but knowing that I'm going to have them year after year. And I have lost some because they were upset with, you know, their group of 3 bow hunters that I have 2 different times. If one don't draw, the other 2 don't like coming but themselves, or say 2 don't draw, the other one won't come. And so anyway, that's my question about that. The next challenge is going to be the baiting issue. That will affect my rifle hunters. I probably will lose them. The ones I've had for 20 years.
Why would you?
Just the way they like to hunt. They like to hunt out of a blind and watching corn. Other than that, I don't know how I would provide on my properties 4 or 5 guys hunting successfully. There's some corn that I could use, corn stubble or whatever. Or you know, I've thought about the possibility of buying some crops from the farmers to leave. Of course, that's another cost, another issue to deal with. Not all the places that we hunt that I provide blinds, they're in pastures. I can't plant a food plot there. So it would really affect that. Are you going to decide before long on your baiting issue, or I don't know?
That particular issue is just sitting there.
Okay.
And we're trying to get information and studies, and we haven't seen fit to bring anything forward.
Okay. So maybe for next year, or I mean,
I doubt it, but
no decision for,
No
okay,
decisions have been made.
okay. Okay, I appreciate that, because I know that's a huge issue. And that is your job, is making sure that we keep our deer herd. But yet, on the other hand, it's gonna affect a lot of people like me out there to one extent or another. And the other thing is turkeys. Are we gonna probably stick with the, and this is for non-residents. And I try to offset my losses for deer hunters that I've had lately with turkey hunters. And I know this year we're gonna have a drawing for non-resident. Is that something that looks like it's gonna continue to happen, or is this just short term to see
It would be
population?
it would be our preference to have the turkeys rebound to where that isn't necessary.
Okay,
But we felt we had to cut some back, and we didn't really want to cut back from the average hunter. And through a lot of public comment and whatnot, that's the area we did it. But it would be nice if we could turn that around and have unlimited over the counter
Right.
again.
right. So I understand your concern, because like in my area where I'm at, we really don't have a problem with the turkey decline right now. We did 6-7 years ago in our area, but not so much now. So I didn't know where that was, what we were.
Well, it's there for now.
Okay. Okay. And I'm assuming there's gonna be a leftover tag possibility in units. If I was reading that right. I guess what I'm asking, and I didn't do the research on it, but what we had in, I'm in unit 3 for the turkeys, and was wondering if you knew how many non-resident tags were issued like in the past versus what you're going to allow. You know, if you were allowing more, then there would be leftovers, and it would be easier for me to find a hunter after February 9th to fill a spot in my. So I didn't know if you're aware of the possibilities of what's going to happen there.
I don't know.
Not right now.
Mr. Chair, if you'd like, we have the expert over right across the room, and we've had a lot of conversation about this very topic. If you would allow, Kent could come up and maybe visit about that a minute, about how you set those, and Kent, and what would happen if, what you anticipate if we have left over. Sure.
Yeah, so Kent Tricky, small game coordinator. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me at the moment, but the process that we followed to do that is because previously our non-resident tags, spring turkey permits were over the counter, and you could, with those, you can hunt in, they were valid in 5 of the 6 hunt units. We didn't have demand before, right? Because we didn't sell on a per unit basis. But in our postseason harvest survey, we asked hunters which county, and therefore which unit, did you primarily hunt in? And so for each year, we estimated which units or how many hunters primarily hunted in a particular unit. And so from those estimates, we then took a 5-year average and then reduced that by 25%. So the goal was, of course, with going to a quota, was to reduce pressure, reduce harvest in some form or fashion. And so we took the approach of doing that through the number of permits that were available, and further restricting those non-residents and where they could move and work and hunt within the state. And so from that, of course, it just kind of depends on the unit. But for example, in unit 3, the Northeast unit, over the last 5 years, hunters that we estimated were primarily using that unit were pretty consistent. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but say 3,000 to 4,000 hunters. And so because that was consistent, you reduce that average by 25%, that is likely going to be a reduction in the number of non-residents. Whereas if we had a unit that was at 4,000 4 years ago, and then 2,000 now, that average is going to be probably about where demand was anyway. And so point being, we don't know exactly, but I would certainly suspect in unit 3 that there's going to be, you know, relatively higher demand. And I don't think that's any surprise either, just from our turkey populations. That's probably some of our most consistent habitat, consistent turkey numbers in that area. So that's
Your goal was basically to drop it 25.
that was the goal that we approached it with, that we could standardize across all of our units.
So there's a likelihood. It's a two-week period. I had to yell out at Pratt, Stephen, can't remember her name. There had already been 2,870 applications. First pick was 2,800 available. So the demand had already exceeded in 2 weeks. The wasn't three. Down six.
I've had, the thing with the turkeys is I've had a handful of guys that have come hunt with me consistently for years, but it was always a good possibility I could get another 5 or 10. Just picking them up as the season came on, and I guess that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
So there's just another hit.
Okay.
I'm kind of curious. Kansas's draw rates historically for our deer, especially going into the turkey, 75%, so 3 out of 4 are still going to be successful in their draw. Our deer rates are still way higher than most states in most situations. So I'm kind of curious, other outfitters have figured this out in other states that don't have that same success rate. So there may be something maybe that we could learn from those folks so that they carry on their businesses successfully with more uncertainty than we have here. So perhaps there's something that could be learned there that might be
Sure.
beneficial.
And since you bring that up, I'll add to it. You know, visiting with him maybe later, my issue was keeping the same guys. Because I knew them, I developed friendships with them. I know the way they hunt, and I understand all that, and like to keep them. Where other outfitters are giving and taking. If somebody's got too many, maybe they would offer me a couple hunters to fill my spots. You know, and early on, I did that. I had some guys that were guys you wouldn't want to come hunt with you. And so I've developed a relationship with good people, and I would like to keep those good people coming, but it's getting to be a real challenge financially, and even for them. Counting, it's like a vacation for them. They look forward to that from the time they leave 1 year to coming back. They're having fun, look forward, but if they can't get their tag for their group, it turns into a mess for them, a mess for me. So
Okay, we need to move on here.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on non-agenda items?
We have one more from online. He's been
Okay.
waiting a little bit. Dwayne, I'm gonna unmute you. Dwayne Miller. Should pop up on your screen, Dwayne, to unmute yourself. Just a second. Let me do it a different way. Okay, Dwayne, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Should be able to unmute himself. Unmuted on that.
Technology is great, but
Should we go on? And if you can get him back, we'll try to
That'll work.
do another time.
Yeah.
No other non-public, public. Yes,
I'll just try to keep this pretty short. I understand there's gonna be a turkey, I'm Gerald Smedley. I understand there's gonna be a turkey, population study starting soon. And I wanted to try to give a little bit input on why I think the population is down a little bit. I think a lot of it has to do with some of the walk-in hunting and no way to limit the traffic on that walk-in hunting. There's a lot of individuals, I hunt in an area and right next to me, there's a lot of walk-in hunting. And there'll be anywhere from 5 to 20 different vehicles there during the hunting season. And if half of them get bag their game, they're taking a lot of birds, a lot of deer out of one area. And it's really hard. I know it's not easy to regulate that. But I'm just saying, by allowing that much traffic on a walk-in hunting area, it really is hard to keep the population up. For instance, like 5 years ago, I seen probably 30 turkeys easily on my property about any time I went. And then now, like this last year, I seen 5 birds total. There were like 2 toms and 3 hens. And I know there's predators out there too, but I have to believe that a lot of the decrease in population is because of the walk-in hunting and no way to control that. And I see the same thing with deer hunting. Most of gravel roads, dirt roads down there turn into highways during hunting season because everybody's trying to get to those areas. And that's hard to keep your bigger deer, your herd increasing or on a good stand still with all the walk-in positions. So I'd let you know that and take that into consideration when you're doing some of the studies.
thank you. Okay, any other yes, sir.
Off track here. My name's Daryl Becker. Just a couple of notes after listening to some folks here. You know, we wouldn't be in some of this predicament here if it wasn't for the way that KDWP has handled the deer population in the past. Back when Lloyd Fox was around, I mean, people want to come here for a reason. And I think it's a finite resource. And the only thing that's really changed is the amount of people wanting to come in. And that is kudos to the department. So, I mean, we have to adjust, but we still want to keep our resource for our people here in the state as well. And those people are having harder times all the time, finding a place to go. And as far as letting more and more in, I think you're competing with yourself with trying to lease walk-in hunting land for people. Then the more permits you give, the more expensive it's going to be, the more you have to pay. I think you're going to be hurting yourself in places. And I think one of the worst things that could be done is to move that season further into November. We're here, just like I said before, because of the way the department has handled it. And that's why we have the issues that we're even speaking about today. So I think you guys have done a great job and I think you're on the right track.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we'll start now with the agency and state fiscal status.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brad Lovelace, Secretary. So right now we're midway through fiscal year 2024, which began July 1st of last year. The Park B Fund revenue is derived, as I've said in the past, from the entrance, camping fees, and annual vehicle passes at our state parks. Total revenue for December was $2.2 million. December revenue was 50% higher than recent years average as we receive back due monies from Aspira, the park licensing system. Also, remember, one of the reasons it's so high in December is that's when people sign up for the coming year, right? So it's a big push then, but better than in previous years, so that's what we'd like to see. Fiscal year to date revenue is 6.85 million, and also an increase from the previous year to date. Cash balance at the end of December was 8.2 million. The cabin net revenue for parks and public lands combined is from the rental of cabins located in our state park system and select public land locations. Cabin net revenue in December was just over $280,000. Fiscal year to date revenue is just under $790,000. This is also an increase from the previous year to date. Again, good news. The Wildlife Fee Fund is derived from the sale of hunting and fishing licenses, big game permits, tags, et cetera, to hunters and anglers. Wildlife Fee Fund for December was 2.4 million. This is similar to revenue for recent years in December. Fiscal year to date revenue is 10.7 million. The cash balance, something we're talking a lot, and I should mention, one of the reasons why Assistant Secretary Stuart Schrog and Parks Division Director Linda Landerman aren't here today is because there are budget hearings in Topeka. So the legislature is back and we're having lots of conversation with them. Been talking a lot with them about our budget. So the cash balance in the Wildlife Fee Fund as of the end of 2023 was 22.1 million, but we expect to cut into that a little bit because of increased cost and for everything, including to do the programs that our constituents depend on. And so we're going to eat into that balance a little bit. You can't do that year after year, but we're going to do that a little bit in the coming year. Boat Fee Fund. This fund is derived from boat registrations, and this is used to provide boating safety, education, and infrastructure like boat ramps to protect and support the boating public. Receipts for December were approximately $61,000. That's an increase from the previous year to date and recent years average. Fiscal year to date revenue is almost $550,000. The balance in the boating fee fund at the end of December was 2.5 million. The governor has presented her recommendations regarding the agency budget earlier this month. And as I said, we're in hearings today. We'll be in hearings Monday with the Senate. 2 weeks from then, we'll be in hearings in the House. And so lots of conversations about our budget and trying to educate our legislators on what we're recommending and why. So those are ongoing conversations. With that, Mr. Chair, I stand for questions.
Any questions for Brad?
Are there any additional discussions about non-hunter angler fees or donations or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, we appreciate the question, Commissioner Lister. We continue to have discussions and talk with other states on innovative ways to allow folks that aren't hunters or anglers to participate in supporting, the efforts for game in Kansas. We don't have any great ideas for that, but we are continuing to have those conversations. I had just a couple weeks ago in a meeting with some other state directors. And so we're trying to figure out if there's place for that. Certainly if and from those users, if they have ideas or a willingness, that's always easier for us to get the legislature to agree with if the users themselves say we want to pay this. And so as you talk with groups, if they have ideas on that, we'd love to visit with them about that. But we think it's a good idea. It's just hard to figure out a way to navigate that.
What's the critical mass you need for groups?
Yeah, I'd say we're willing to start anywhere. Yeah, if it's a good idea, it'll catch on. And so even if it's a small group, we're glad to talk with them and see what that is and how we might make it work. Thank you.
One of those Mr. Secretary, one of those means that has already been approved was the license plates. Would you give us an update on where those are?
I'd love to. Let me see if there's somebody here who's sharper than I am on this. Unless somebody steps in or somebody on the phone, I'll answer this based on my recollection. This is a little bit challenging because you work it through the Department of Revenue, and they have a lot of people trying to get a lot of license plates out there. What we found, the latest news I heard on this was in December, we were asking them, how soon will we have this? Because we feel like we keep giving them information and then waiting for them to reply, and they're busy. But we found out in December that they actually only issue these twice a year. And when we ask them in December, okay, we've got our information, and are we in I think one time's like January and the second time's like July. We said, okay, are we good for that January issuance? They said, no, you aren't. So now the best we can hope for, based on the schedule they gave us, is July. So that's not good news. That's not as fast as we want. It's just a process we don't have a lot of control. And it's not because those folks aren't doing anything. If you drive down the road, you see kind of a proliferation of personalized license plates in Kansas and or for causes. And that's what's keeping them busy, is there's a lot of new ideas out there that they're having.
Okay, any other questions? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Brad said, the legislature is up and rolling and seems to be moving pretty quickly. We actually took a hit legislatively about the time the session started. You all probably met Ashley Beeson at the Emporium meeting. We were very excited to have a legislative liaison on board, and she hit the ground running. Unfortunately, another agency made her an offer she could not refuse. So we're back to the plain old guys again, trying to cover the bases. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to get another person in that position, because like I say, it was great to look forward to that, and our bubble kind of burst right at the gate. So anyhow, on our legislative radar at this point, we have 3 statutes currently that are related to us that we're paying attention to. Brad actually testified on one yesterday that some of you are familiar with. That was Senate Bill 347 in the Ag and Natural Resources Senate Committee. And that is a bill that would require commission appointees to be approved by the Senate. And Brad can tell you more about the nature of the testimony and the feeling he got from the committee yesterday.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I guess I would tell you that the drift of hearing from Senator Stephan, who initiated that bill, the concern I heard was that we're going to end up having commissioners appointed by the governor who are against hunting and fishing. And that I wouldn't say that's based on what they've heard from you all, but what they've heard from other states in other parts of the country. And so the word I heard was preemptive. They were thinking about doing this so that they could make sure that people that represented particularly hunting and fishing interests, is what they kept mentioning, were strongly recommended, strongly represented on the commission. That was the main concern I heard. And we mentioned in our testimony that all of our regulations have to fall under the statutes that the legislature controls, and our fees are controlled by the caps that they allow us to have. And so there is a lot of control. That was our perspective, but for some of them, they may not feel like that's enough control. So that's why they were pushing for this idea of Senate confirmation of each new commissioner. The other thing I'd mention, I mentioned this to Dan a little earlier, while we were there, a representative stood up and said that he had a bill he was going to initiate that, so we expect to see that here soon, that would actually change the appointment process for commissioners. He said he would recommend that they move it from 7 to 9 commissioners, that the governor be able to appoint 3 of those 9, and that the remaining 6 to be appointed by the president of the Senate, 2 by the Speaker of the House, and 2 by the Attorney General, is his recommendation. So we'll be dealing with that bill here in the near term, I expect.
Of the other 2 bills that we're currently tracking, House Bill number 2541 is before the House Committee on Ag and Natural Resources. And this bill would establish a state conservation fund in the treasurer's office. It would be a dedicated fund there, and also some related funds that would relate directly to wildlife and parks in terms of the peripheral funds connected to that. And as written, the bill's purpose is establishing those funds to serve as a conduit for funding to come in for conservation purposes. So it would be a good thing in our world all around for that. There are grant processes tied into the current version of that would provide those grant funds for things that would habitat establishment and general conservation purposes. So that would be a positive bill. The other one that
2541, who sponsored that?
requested by Representative Blex on behalf of Kansans for Conservation.
You want to do that group post? You want to do that? Yeah. Excuse me, Mr. Chair. That Kansas for Conservation group is like, I think they described as 25 or 30 different groups, conservation, governmental organizations like Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, the Nature Conservancy, as well as Kansas Parks and Recreation Association, and just a whole host of even the Kansas Corn Growers Association, Kansas Wheat Growers were also part of that. So a broad coalition of groups.
The other bill that we're currently keeping an eye on is House Bill 2476. And this bill relates to the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area, which was established in 2006. And it encompasses 29 counties in eastern Kansas and also 12 western Missouri counties. And it's a little bit difficult to follow what the purpose of this is, although the bill that's currently been introduced, 2476, would prohibit any designation in this area of national historic trails. Currently, there are 5 there. And any attempt to designate any such trail would require approval of the Kansas legislature based on this bill. It would particularly impact us because within that area that's designated, we have 14 state parks and wildlife areas and other properties that we manage. So it would have a significant impact upon us if the Kansas legislature took over total control of all named trails and parks in that area. So kind of a controversial type bill, and we're keeping an eye on that one also. That's
Okay.
all I've got, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for Dan? All right, let's move to the commissioner update and drawing.
Mr. Chair,
Now, Jake, you're gonna handle that?
Mr. Chair. Can we, I think we got Dwayne figured out. Can we get him real
Yeah.
quick on the open comment?
Sure.
Okay, Dwayne, I'm gonna unmute you now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just have a quick question about if there's any progress on regulations as far as using drones for deer recovery.
No, we currently don't have any. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm just getting this thing figured out.
Mr. Chair, we have a couple of experts here, and Rich Schulteis is on. You may be leading that committee, right, Rich?
Sure. We haven't had a lot of activity lately, but I can comment briefly. In our regulation summaries booklet, we touch on this a little bit. The interpretation of Airborne Hunting Act and electronic equipment in transmitting and utilization of drones for both hunting and retrieving game. And so I'd point you in that direction as far as some further information that's available, but certainly turn it to our legal counsel. We have not had any recent conversations about changes to that of our regulation that would become more permissive for drones, but otherwise I'll just turn it to Dan for.
And my only comment, Rich, was that we don't currently have anything in the process
Mm.
related to drones.
Okay,
Okay.
so they're, okay.
All right. Jake?
Yep, made it up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I know you guys are pretty familiar with the commission permit and our drawing that we do every year. But for our visiting public and those online, I'll go ahead and give a little bit of a background on it and some of the statistics and the good things for conservation. It's done. And then we'll go through the drawing process. I have the bucket of balls here with me, and if it's all right with you guys, I'll kind of make my way behind you so we don't have to reach across the table. And I think we're short one today for the drawing, so Gerald will probably have you come back to you and draw the final one there. So the commission permits began in 2006, and the intention is to provide either one elk permit, one antelope permit, or up to 7 any deer permits that may be issued on an annual basis through this drawing process. And the way that it works is any active conservation-oriented organization or chapters of organizations are able to apply for these permits. We do the drawing, and then they are able to auction off to the highest bidder those permits. And that money then they get to recoup the cost of the permit. The organization does. They retain 15% of it to use towards whatever conservation activities they choose. The other 85% is remitted back to the agency, and then the organization is able to apply for specific conservation activities for those funds to go back towards. So since 2006, this process has raised over $1.43 million for conservation in the state of Kansas. It has gained a lot in popularity as far as the number of applicants that we receive. This year we had a total for 2024, we had a total of 115 eligible applicants. Last year, it was 7 deer permits that were issued, and those permits sold for a record average of $45,857, with the highest one being sold for $51,000. The total raised with the 7 permits last year was also a record at $321,000. So pretty impressive. The highest ever bid on a deer permit, just for reference, was in 2022, and that was $55,000. So with that, I would stand for any questions if anybody had them. Otherwise, we'll proceed with the drawing. We good? All right. Make sure the lid's on.
Yeah.
You ready, Sheila?
Ready.
All right.
Start.
77.
Yeah.
Okay. 77 is Ducks Unlimited State Committee, Chapter 1.
$38.
38 is Ducks Unlimited, Southwest Chapter number 3.
$41.
40 is Pheasants Forever, Solomon Valley, Chapter 450.
55.
55 is Pheasants Forever, Walnut River Chapter. So far, all of these are said.
100.
Number 100 is Kansas Bow Hunters Association Northeast Region.
62.
62 is Ducks Unlimited Rice County, number 70.
Number 72.
72 is Pheasants Forever Wheat Country number 905. And again, all of those have been deer.
All right,
Thank you.
Yes, there was some controversy a couple of years ago about, the mother chapter taking all the money from the local chapters when this was, gifted to them. What did we end up doing there? There
Well,
was some conversation about it. What I'm saying is, the Ducks Unlimited in Marysville gets the draw, but they didn't even they didn't get any of the proceeds from this event.
yeah, that I'm not familiar with. It would depend on the structure. I know some of them are more top-down versus bottom-up type organizations with the chapters. But I think that would be a discussion between the chapter and the national, because I would think the least the chapter would have that 15% and then work with them to decide, but.
Conversation, what about parks? Well, I think we made a ruling a couple years ago that they had to spend the money in a certain way. I guess nobody in this room that remembers that. I guess that's another conversation for next meeting or something. Figure out what the.
Sometimes some of those chapters, there's more than one person who applies for the same chapter. Sometimes it's the regional person. Sometimes it may be the chapter treasurer or someone lower. It depends on what numbers associated. Okay, so if the regional person came in first, they're the ones who get the number and the other one's a duplicate, so they don't get a number because it's the same chapter. So the chapter is in there only once, even though there may have been 2 applications. Okay, so sometimes, yeah, so whoever the winning, like the chapter regional people, then the money went to the regional or the national association. So it went to the state of Kansas chapter rather than that littler chapter, because that's who actually applied. And they're, what they do within their organization, we don't have any say in.
But as far as the projects that 85% that's remitted back to the agency go towards, they do have to apply for
They have to
approval on
apply for
that.
that
And they
money.
are, all goes back to Kansas. So
Now say that again.
the 85% of it that comes back to the department is all spent on conservation in the state of Kansas, because they have to apply back to the department for permission to get access to those funds to use them for a specific project.
But then the 15%, we don't know whether. it
Correct.
goes to the local chapter or the state chapter.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Richard?
okay, thank you very much, Chairman Lumber and Commissioners. My name is Rich Schulteis. I'm an Assistant Director in the Wildlife Division. I'm stationed in the Employee Research and Survey Office. I'm here today to introduce the webless migratory game bird regulations for the 24-25 seasons. The regulations for doves, cranes, snipe, rails, woodcock, and crows must adhere to federal framework similar to the process we have to follow for waterfowl. But unlike waterfowl, stability in those federal frameworks allows us to include our webless regulations in our permanent regulation for the state of Kansas, which is quite handy for us, to be honest. For the 24-25 seasons, there have been no changes to those federal frameworks, which are, the sideboards we have to fall within. And we do not anticipate any changes to proposed regulations or state regulation, but staff final recommendation will be made at the March commission meeting. And with that, I provided a summary of the likely potential season dates and limits in the webless briefing book item. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions you may have.
Good to go. Any questions? Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, visiting and viewing public. Tom Madrowski, Migratory Game Bird Program Manager. Today we'll be beginning in the annual Kansas Wildlife and Parks Waterfowl Regulatory Cycle. And for Kansas, that mostly pertains to the development of the 2024 and 2025 waterfowl seasons. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, with input from the Flyway Councils, annually develops frameworks for which states are able to establish migratory game bird hunting seasons. These frameworks establish maximum bag and possession limits, season lengths, and earliest and latest closing season dates. States must operate within these frameworks when establishing state migratory game bird seasons. A briefing item was prepared in the commission packet regarding the development of Kansas's 2024-25 waterfowl seasons, including other proposed U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service frameworks and other pertinent background material. There are no changes in the federal framework from the previous years. As we are in the scoping process, staff recommendations will be presented at the March commission meeting. And with that, I'd be glad to address any questions.
Any questions for Tom?
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Map Peak Emporia Research and Survey Office. I'll start out with 115.25.7 antelope open season bag limits and permits. I covered this regulation in detail at the last commission meeting, and I don't have a lot to add at this time. I will remind you all that we're not proposing any changes to the season dates or permit types, so things will be the same as they were last season. The one thing we don't have to recommend yet is permit allocations for the firearm and muzzleloader permits. Our biologists are still trying to get the winter aerial surveys completed, but the snow cover out west has been a problem, and we need that snow to melt so that the pronghorn are visible and they can conduct the surveys. So that's the holdup at this time. That said, we will have permit allocations to recommend at the next meeting. And I don't have anything more to add at this time.
Okay, any questions for Matt? Well, move on.
Okay, this is LKAR 115.25.8. I also covered this regulation in detail at the last meeting. At that time, we didn't have any changes to recommend to the season structure, but we were anticipating a bit of an increase in the limited draw permits valid on Fort Riley. And we were expecting that increase due to the relatively high populations there. Since then, we've had discussions with Fort Riley staff and have considered a couple different options to increase harvest without adding excessive hunter pressure to the fort. That's something we're really sensitive to, particularly with those any elk permits that are once in a lifetime. And so we want to maintain a high quality hunting experience there without excessive pressure. The option that seems to have the most support at this time is to establish a new season on the fort for the month of January, in which all unfilled Fort Riley permits would be valid. This would give unsuccessful permit holders some extra time to try to fill their tag and might allow these hunters to address damage issues that sometimes occur just off the fort. So, but the main thing that January season would do is that it might allow an extra 5 or 6 elk to be harvested by hunters that are currently unsuccessful. We're still considering these options, and this isn't a recommendation yet, but we will be back at the next meeting with a decision on this, as well as recommended permit allocations. And so with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions for Matt?
I have one just out of curiosity, Matt. How many non-resident tenant permits are sold for Unit 3 each year?
I would have to look that up. I don't know that I have that on me. If I do, I'll get it to you, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I'd like to know at some point.
Okay, yep, I'll find that out.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Matt?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Levi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I will start with KAR 115-25-9A, which is our deer seasons and bag limits on our military subunits. This regulation's done separately from our regular statewide season regulation to accommodate potential changes that are necessary to season dates to work around training activities on those military subunits that are necessary for defense, national defense. And so typically we've brought this regulation to public hearing in June. So to start with Fort Riley, in addition to the regular pre-rut antlerless whitetail season on Fort Riley, they will have they want additional antlerless season from November 29th through December 1st. And then their open firearm season would be December 14th through December 22nd. And I do have a correction to the briefing book item. In that part where it says a deer hunter may only use one whitetail antlers permit, we would strike that. I missed that when I did this because they have requested that the full 5 additional antlerless permits that a hunter could have should be valid on the fort. They're trying to increase their antlerless deer harvest there. And then that would bring us then to Fort Leavenworth. And their firearm season on the Fort Leavenworth, they're requesting November 16th through November 17th, November 23rd through the 24th, the 28th through December 1st, December 7th through December 8th, and 14th through December 15th. And then also they would like to participate in the extended firearm season, the longest one, which is January 1st through January 19th of 2025, and the extended archery season in January for antlerless whitetail deer, which would be January 20th through January 31st. And then that brings us to the Smoky Hill subunit. They're requesting that their firearm season be December 4th through December 15th, which is the same as the statewide season, and that they are able to use the full 5 antlerless whitetail permits on the Smoky Hill subunit. And so with that, I would get questions over the military subunit seasons.
Any questions for Levi? Okay, move on.
All right, the next one I have is KR 115-4-4, which is big game legal equipment. We were requested to review the materials that are allowable as a muzzleloader projectile, concern over that with the current definition, we'd be preventing potential non-toxic ammunition choices because some of our choices specifically list lead. And so the recommendation that we're bringing to the commission is that in the regulation, we just strike the word lead out of it. And if you flip to the second page of the briefing book item for that, about midway down under this lowercase b number 2, you can see under the muzzleloader where the lead has been struck out of that in the regulation. So that's what it would look like. That's the change that would occur. And so I would take questions on this one now.
Any questions for Levi?
I don't know if this is Levi or Dan. Would this be ready to go for this fall's muzzleloader season?
Should be.
And
There are no guarantees, so.
None assumed.
There are too many hands in the process.
None assumed.
I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be at this point.
I just noticed on the couple of those big new WEHAs, it says non-lead. And if this isn't in place, it theoretically takes muzzleloader hunters out of those big new WEHAs. If we don't get it in place, and that's some nice properties that we'd like to have available.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other questions and the commission's okay with it, we would like to ask the commission to approve having Dan move this forward in the promulgation process.
Dan, move it forward.
And I will ask Levi to forward me the final draft.
Are we ready for the next item?
Yes.
All right. The next item is the carcass movement regulation. I've spoken with Dan on this. I won't spend very much time. We're still working on pulling other states' regulations and try to get some language put together that we feel comfortable with. Dan raised some legal questions over this prior, and so we're trying to get that straight and would hope to have some an actual regulation potential language ready to go maybe by the next meeting here would be the goal.
Okay, I noticed under potential, how did you word it? Potential language. We talked at the last meeting. I suggested 40 miles, you kind of like 30, I think. And then I suggested we consider transporting to a processor. Is there a reason you don't like that?
If things are, if everything's disposed well, it's typically not an issue. A lot of this was pulled looking at what other states have done too and how they've regulated it. And talking about that 40, 30-mile buffers, that's one of the issues that Dan has brought up is the actual enforceability of something like that. And so stuff we're gonna have to work through. Some of the other language was pulled from, again, like I said, other states' regulations or some of the best management practices as examples to use. But, we've raised some issues with like, what is a hide with excess flesh removed, stuff like that. And so we're going to try to get this to where it accomplishes the goals, but it doesn't leave too much ambiguity in it to where, we force our law enforcement staff into making, subjective calls as to what is and not isn't okay with it.
Well, there's just less and less people that process deer. And if we could have a little longer distance to transport them, people would do it without having to break the law if they just went directly from the kill site to the process.
And that would, and looking into that would also fit with where we were with some of the recommendations on submitting heads and capes to taxidermists and stuff too.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, it's turned out to be pretty challenging. Levi and I kind of banged our heads on this and at least what I hope we can come up with is something that is based on the risk and doesn't necessarily relate to the mileage so much thing. Because if someone is complying with what they need to in terms of minimizing the risk of transmission, it doesn't really matter whether they're going 5 miles or 50 miles. So I would like to, if we can work it out, I would like to eliminate that mileage element of it entirely because that doesn't really relate to the risk so much as the other standards in terms of the way you need to handle and process the carcass. So,
well, I think so too. So
I think there's just lots of people that I've heard from lots of people that are deer hunters that say their processor is 35 miles. And you're just going to continue you're going to go 100, you're just going to continue to hear that. Well, I'm breaking the law at 5 miles.
well, and I think it's a lot more critical to follow the appropriate steps up to that point rather than worry about how far you're going to haul it after you get it in the back of the truck.
we're on the same page. Any other questions for Levi?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let's take a 10-minute break.
that requires. And there's no real explanation about. About half of them having to do with like capers and. Oh, exactly. The work thing is, it'll slow it down. Oh, yeah, because, I mean, it's slow enough now, getting what the government on it. But we're adding more process and it'll slow it down.
Good.
Okay, we'll get back started. The next up is Ryan Stuckey.
I'm on. Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Ryan Stuckey, Public Lands Assistant Director, and I'm also serving as the Acting Director. I'm here today to present the new regulation addressing the overpressure of non-resident waterfowl hunters on our public lands. Back on April 27th this last year, at Bonner Springs, we presented for the first time the idea of creating a new regulation for non-resident waterfowl hunting on public lands. Since then, we have talked about non-residents spending more consecutive days on public waterfowl properties, hunting in larger groups, and spending more time per day on these specific properties pursuing waterfowl. We believe this has changed the waterfowl behavior to a point there's a growing concern that ducks specifically are not able to utilize our public wetlands sufficiently to meet their dietary, energy, and resting needs because of human pressure that has increased in intensity. Resident waterfowl hunters are also reporting an increasing volume that this change in non-resident waterfowl hunting culture has decreased their opportunities on department lands and waters. We have vetted several recommendations and ideas on how we could restrict the non-resident pressure while still giving those non-residents several days to hunt waterfowl on public lands throughout the established Kansas waterfowl seasons. We still believe the original proposal to restrict non-resident waterfowl hunting on public lands to Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays is the best recommendation. We have workshopped this proposal in the 5 previous commission meetings, and this now being the 6th. We have mentioned several times that we have been in communication with our federal partners, being the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All 3 partners are in agreement with our proposal and understand that we are presenting the written regulation today. We understand that regulations and hunting seasons are time sensitive. Therefore, our recommendation is to move the written regulation to the promulgation process following today so that we can have the regulation in effect for the start of the 2024 waterfowl seasons. Jason, do you have the, there has been a few edits since the regulation was published in the briefing book, and there was also an additional section added. So Jason's going to have that up there. So the folks.
You have the new ones on here.
We have it here, don't we?
Yes.
This is the new one.
The new one, you have it, yes, in the handout.
And then there's just a sentence in the back side.
Yeah, there's a few sentences on page 2. I'll kind of go through the regulation. So 115.8.26 is the non-resident waterfowl hunting. Section A, during an established hunting season for migratory waterfowl, a non-resident shall be restricted to Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the hunting and taking of migratory waterfowl at the following locations. Subsection 1 is Department Lands and Waters, which means state parks, state lakes, recreational grounds, wildlife areas, sanctuaries, fish hatcheries, natural areas, historic sites, and other lands and waters and facilities that are under the jurisdiction and control of the Secretary through ownership, lease, license, cooperative agreement, memorandum of understanding, or other arrangement. Okay, we move on to the next 3 subsections, numbers 2, 3, and 4, which spell out the properties of our 3 federal partners. We want to list those properties individually so it would be clear as Kansas reservoirs and our national wildlife refuges. In working with our federal partners and our department legal staff, we reviewed several federal codes and regulations. In short, we see that federal regulation requires hunting and fishing regulations to be consistent with state law to the extent possible. Our department's legal staff and the federal partners do not see anything in the applicable federal law and regulations that would contradict the proposed draft of KAR 115.8.26 concerning non-resident waterfowl hunters. So starting out with the the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer properties, you'll see two subsections. The first, which is A, is listing the reservoir properties. The second is B, which is listing the Missouri River Fish and Wildlife Mitigation Plans. We decided to list these separately for clarity, as they are federally owned by the Corps under Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks lease and are adjacent to the navigable Missouri River. So they're a bit unique, and that is why we listed them in the regulation. Again, that was for clarity. We move to section B, the following definitions. We mentioned the water, we went ahead and listed the migratory waterfowl. The KSA 321008, and also definition of a non-resident in subsection 2. We then listed 4 other subsections which addresses the non-resident lifetime license holder, the non-resident active duty military personnel, active duty military personnel and immediate family, and non-resident full-time students, which would all qualify as residents. The next subsection was Department of Lands and Waters, and I've already went through that definition. So we then move on to section C, and these restrictions shall not apply to the spring snow goose conservation order season. And that we've had that in all the discussions prior to that. Moving on to subsection D, we changed this one, I believe at the last commission meeting, and these restrictions shall not apply to property enrolled and designated as either a walk-in hunting or a high walk-in hunting area, which accounts for a little over 1 million acres. It was just, I think it was asked why, and I think when you look at those properties and the contracts in which are written on those, and we just kind of felt like that did give it, you know, that's 1 million acres out there, and that will give them folks the opportunity, if they can't be on public lands, to enjoy and use some of that walk-in hunting property. Going on to section E, these restrictions shall not apply to navigable rivers in Kansas, which are the Kansas, Missouri, and the Arkansas rivers. And then section F is a new one we have added since the last commission meeting. And these restrictions shall not apply to the special hunts program or other department authorized waterfowl outreach programs. So at this point, I'll take any questions.
Is there any talk about, there was some talk about scouting, being able to vote on these areas on days other than Saturday, Sunday, or Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. What was the consensus of the agency on trying to regulate that portion of it?
So in the reservoirs, there won't be any restriction on any of the boating. And that would be either folks fishing or folks scouting. Won't be on the reservoirs, any restrictions on that.
What about?
There are some restrictions already in place on some of our state-owned wildlife areas.
But so a non-resident will be able to scout the bottom. A non-hunting.
I believe there was in our reference document, it does address some of that. But I think when we were moving to present that, we were waiting to get through this, and then we were going to go back and adjust the reference document.
Okay, thank you.
I'm following up on that one. It says for the hunting and taking of migratory waterfowl, it doesn't say anything about being out there on the marsh, walking around or scouting or disrupting things.
Okay, so in the definitions of take, is why we added take, and some of that is pursuing and disrupting the wildlife. That's under take.
Is that clear enough for the average person?
We have some verbiage in our hunting regulation summary that talks about the taking of wildlife.
So take includes any kind of scouting,
Harassing.
but scouting. I mean, do you see what
I don't.
what they're talking about? What we've heard is that, there's so much activity and they're driving around flushing birds, not just non-residents, but the issue being the activity on the.
I think when you look at scouting, it's a little bit subjective on what they're doing. I mean, to go out and see if the area has waterfowl is one thing, But to get in a boat and run up and down through Cheyenne Bottoms, we have some restrictions on that already. But I think what we were looking at is fine tuning that reference document to allow, once this goes into effect, then we could fine tune some of that in the reference document.
Okay, as long as
For the
it's covered
access.
somewhere, because to me, that is shaky. In my understanding, the way I would read it as a non-professional going in and reading that. It just my observation, I'm not telling you you're wrong by any stretch. But just a concern.
Okay.
I have one other concern. And I didn't catch this before, down on D, the fact that it does not apply to WEHA or iWEHA.
Right.
Okay, as I considered this at home, I pondered, I see pros and cons both ways. The one thing that I find confusing or potentially confusing is that when we make public lands regulations such as the baiting and the trail cams issues, and that applies to both public lands and WEHA, we're treating that the same. And now we've got one that's different.
Correct.
Not including that, I think leaves some room for some confusion. It's just an observation. I'm not saying it has to go one way or the other, but I think the more similar they are, the better off we are. Just my point, just a point I wanted to bring up.
I've thought about that a lot and asked. I just don't know that there is that many WEHA areas that are known migratory bird hunting areas. There is a handful in Kansas, and I don't see that as being a real big deal, but I understand the idea of, yeah, you can't bait or have cameras on public lands or walk in. I just don't know how big a deal it is when you just particularly say waterfowl. I don't think it's that's not the problem that we're having. That's true. WEHA is not our main issue of having problems.
Is this ready for the promulgation process?
Could I bring something forward, please? We don't even run waterfowl hunts, so I don't really have a player in the game, but a lot of people in our association do run waterfowl hunts. So I'll give you from somebody that doesn't run them, that deals with, private ground, and I've got 3,800 acres right next to Melbourne Lake that we manage. And areas around there, I have 37 landowners total in that area now. What it's brought, people saw this coming, it's been discussed, like you said, 6th, 7th time, that's fine. So you're at the point where you're ready to move this forward. But how has it affected the private sector? It has, definitely. A lot of my landowners, and I could bring probably 10 of them up here, were approached this year constantly during the duck waterfowl season, wanting to lease their land for waterfowl hunting. Now, what happens when they lease that to those guys? And most of them are out of state, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, which a lot of people from Kansas go to those states. But what does it do? The guys have been hunting there for free. The locals been hunting on their ponds, their creeks. They're gone. They're out of there. And I've had 3 landowners went ahead and they said, is it a problem if we lease that? I said, nope, I'm not running hunts. I don't lease the waterfowl rights. You aren't interfering with our deer and our turkey hunting, quail. But now they're leasing their property, their ponds, to non-residents. Some of them are leasing them to residents too. But when you ask a resident, you want to pay to hunt? Nope. And nothing against that. So it ends up being a non-resident. So what are you going to do? You're going to actually start kicking a lot of people that have hunted on private land and private areas off those areas is what's going to happen. You're going to see a lot of them that little Johnny that hunted on Charlie's place for 20 years with his grandpa, all of a sudden can't hunt there no more. It's gonna happen, and it is happening. As a lot of the out-of-state hunters realized it, and I'm not talking outfitters. I'm talking just guys that came here and hunted public ground. Just wanted to put that in.
Thank you. You have any more?
That's all I have.
Is it ready to start the promulgation process?
Mr. Chair, that's up to the commission and to Ryan if he's satisfied with it. One thing that I have made mention to Ryan and Stuart since this issue was first workshopped is that we are going to have to support this with all the available supporting information in terms of why this is necessary, the why this is required, the situation that the changes here are intended to resolve, because this will be a regulation that draws considerable attention because of the subject matter and because it will have an impact on revenue. And we always get into a cost benefit analysis because we make decisions that are for the benefit of the species and the habitat. And some of the people that we have to convince about the morals of what we're doing are focused entirely on revenue. And this will be another one of those. So my only comment to, is this one ready, is we need to bulk up in terms of the supporting documentation. Every time we submit a regulation to the process, it has to include an economic impact statement. And that's the part of the process where we can include information about here's why we are doing this, here's why this is necessary, here's what we anticipate, here's the number of complaints we've received, that kind of documentation. And we need to make sure that we've got that covered in spades for this regulation when we do promulgate it.
Well, I agree with that, but we're gonna have to do that no matter what we do. If we just let this set in limbo indefinitely, I think we just move it on to the promulgation process. And I think the rest of the commission is probably ready to go. Is there anybody who wants to wait? I think we've kicked it around quite a while, so let's go ahead.
Yeah, I might mention also that our federal partners were very much in favor of this and were encouraging us to get this going as soon as possible for our next seasons.
Okay.
And all of that is absolutely relevant in the kind of supporting documentation I'm talking about. We just need to make sure that we tell the story of why we are taking this step and why it's necessary when we submit it to the promulgation process.
Okay. Do it. All right. According to my agenda, the remaining items have all been workshopped forever. And they won't be brought up today.
Thank you.
So that concludes our regular agenda. Is there any new business we need to bring forth?
Still have general public comment. We can still have another discussion.
Okay, we do have, if there's any more public comment on non-agenda items. Okay,
I just want, I know we've come out of a fall hunting season where our game wardens have been working hard. We see multiple stories about poaching incidents they're investigating and things. There've been some other situations where I know biologists and game wardens in my area have gotten death threats just for doing their job. And I just want to, as a commissioner, say thank you to each of you employees. Because as hard as things are sometimes, you are the people, you're smart, you know what you're doing, you handle yourselves professionally. You work hard, and I know most of you don't get paid that well. And I just want to say thank you to every one of you that's here and every person within the department, because you guys go so far and above and beyond, and the public has no idea. They have no idea They have no idea about the people who grade roads so you can get to boat ramps and do maintenance and clean out houses and all kinds of things. And so you can tell I'm pretty passionate. There's a lot of things I care a lot about, but I just really want to say thank you to each person within the department for the work you do. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we need to set another meeting?
I think we need to set June if we can.
Set June?
June, yes, we have March and April set.
Where's April?
Where's April?
Okay, April's the 25th in Salina at the K-State campus. College Center Conference.
March 28th.
March 28th in Topeka at the Topeka and Shawnee County Library. Marvin Auditorium, room 101C.
When's the last time we met in Iola?
What month is we're all on?
We need to set June.
Not Hayes.
Can we go back west?
West Hayes.
Let me look at the-
Hayes is fine.
Who picked this spot?
So, let's see.
I don't know who picked this spot. We can have one at Hayes,
Like Hayes.
huh?
Warren, you like Hayes?
I like Hayes.
But he likes Hayes.
What'd you say, March, where?
We'll do Hayes in June,
Okay.
and we need that to be the latest possible of the month.
20 or 27.
Hayes.
The last
What's the
time your
date?
Hayes looks like 2015.
All right, so let's go to Hayes, and that'll be what day again?
It needs to be June 20 if possible. I know that's not the last part of the month, but we have Midwest Association meeting that last Thursday, so we won't even be here.
You think we can make that work?
I think we can make it
I
work.
think she said 20.
All right,
It's okay with you?
June 20.
Yes,
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
okay.
That's fine.
Is that enough? Dan, we don't need to set August yet, do we?
Yeah, because we were gonna look at the full year schedule because we've got an extra meeting in there that we can probably
Okay, so we'll look at that.
either move or take out,
All right,
because we got them doubled
yeah,
up.
we need to set
in
up
the
that.
fall. Yeah, that's probably enough for now.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we don't, you want to do August now, or you just, we
He said
don't?
no.
No, okay. Well, that concludes our agenda for the day. If there's no new business or old business to come before the group, I move the meeting be adjourned.
Going down to Manhattan.